Welcome, and thanks for being here. You can get comfortable. There's nothing you need to do right now. No need to focus too much. Just let the words be in the background. Some thoughts might catch your attention, others might drift away, and that's perfectly fine. If you enjoy this kind of calm space, you can leave a like to support the channel and subscribe if you'd like to come back again. It really helps, and it keeps this space going. For now, just take it easy. Let the sound settle, let the day fade a little, and allow yourself to rest.
When we talk about the universe, we often imagine movement, light, and energy everywhere. Stars burning, galaxies spinning, matter colliding. It feels natural to picture the universe as active and loud, even if that sound cannot reach us. But most of the universe is not like that. Most of it is quiet, vastly quiet. When we say nothing, we usually mean the absence of something we expect. No sound, no motion, no signal. In space, nothing has a different meaning. Nothing is not an exception, it is the default. The regions filled with stars, planets, and light are rare. They are small islands in an ocean of near emptiness. Between them stretches space that appears almost untouched. No sound travels there. No air carries vibration. No familiar movement draws attention. This silence is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It simply exists. And because it is so common, it is easy to overlook. We are drawn to what shines, to what moves, to what changes quickly. Silence does not compete. It waits. In these quiet regions, nothing seems to happen, yet the universe continues. Time passes, distances remain, the structure holds. Silence is not a pause in reality, it is a background condition. When we imagine the universe, we often focus on the few places where something is happening, but those places are surrounded by regions where almost nothing occurs. Understanding this changes perspective. The universe is not mostly full, it is mostly empty, and within that emptiness, everything else exists. Silence is not the absence of the universe, it is what the universe is made of most of the time. In the next moments, we will begin to move deeper into these silent regions, not to find something dramatic, but to understand what it means when almost nothing is there.
Silence in the universe is not something that appears after everything else is removed. It is what exists before anything is added. Matter does not fill space evenly. It gathers, it clumps, it forms stars, planets, clouds, and structures. But between these gatherings, there is far more space than substance. Most regions are left almost untouched. No air, no sound, no constant motion that draws attention. This kind of silence is not fragile, it is stable. It can exist for millions or even billions of years without interruption. Nothing rushes to fill it, nothing disturbs it unless conditions change. From our perspective, silence often feels temporary, like a pause between events. In the universe, silence is the main state. Events are interruptions. This reverses how we usually think. Instead of asking why some places are empty, it becomes more accurate to ask why anything is there at all. The presence of matter is the exception, not the rule. In these silent regions, distance becomes the dominant feature. Objects are separated by vast stretches of nothing. Light takes time to cross them. Signals weaken as they travel. Even gravity becomes subtle. The universe does not feel crowded here. It feels open. This openness is not dramatic. It does not feel lonely or cold in an emotional sense. It simply exists without urgency. Silence does not demand attention. It does not explain itself. It allows things to remain as they are. When we imagine space, we often fill it with invisible motion, but in many places there is almost none. Particles drift slowly. Fields remain steady. Nothing collides often enough to create noise or heat. This is not because something is missing. It is because this is how space naturally is when left alone. Silence is not a lack of activity. It is activity stretched so thin that it becomes unnoticeable. And as we continue, this understanding of silence will shift from something empty to something fundamental, a quiet foundation on which the rest of the universe quietly rests. When we imagine empty space, it is easy to picture a complete void, a place where absolutely nothing exists. But true nothingness is rare, perhaps unreachable. Even in the quietest regions of the universe, something remains. There are faint traces of energy, gentle fields, and particles so sparse that they almost never meet. Silence in space is not absolute absence. It is extreme distance. The farther apart things are, the quieter the region becomes. Interactions slow down. Events become rare. Change stretches over enormous spans of time. In these conditions, silence is not created by removal, but by separation. Things are simply too far apart to affect each other often. This separation gives space its calm character. Nothing pushes, nothing pulls strongly. Motion continues, but it is subtle and slow. A particle may drift for years without encountering another. Light may travel uninterrupted for ages. In such regions, time feels different, not because it changes speed, but because so little happens to mark its passage. Without frequent events, time leaves fewer traces. This makes silence feel deep. It is not empty in a dramatic way. It is empty in a patient way. The universe does not rush to fill these spaces. It allows them to remain open. This openness is important. Without it, structures could not exist. Stars need vast empty regions around them. Galaxies require distance to maintain their shape. Silence provides that distance. It acts as a buffer, preventing constant interaction. In this way, quiet regions are not separate from active ones. They support them. They make stability possible. Silence is not a gap between meaningful places. It is the space that allows meaning to form at all. As we continue, we will move further into how these quiet regions shape the universe, not by acting, but by allowing everything else to act without interference. Silence becomes easier to understand when we stop thinking of it as something passive. In the universe, quiet regions actively shape how everything else behaves. Because there is so much empty space, movement can continue without constant interruption. Objects travel long distances without resistance. Light moves freely, unchanged for vast stretches of time. This freedom is only possible because silence surrounds activity. If space were crowded, motion would be chaotic, collisions would be constant, structures would struggle to remain stable. Silence creates room.
It gives processes space to unfold without pressure. In these quiet regions, energy spreads out instead of concentrating. Heat dissipates, motion smooths, extremes soften. Silence does not amplify anything, it moderates. This moderation is why the universe does not feel violent everywhere at once. Even powerful events like supernovae occur within large, silent environments that absorb their effects over time. The surrounding quiet prevents shock from traveling endlessly. It allows energy to fade naturally. Silence acts as a buffer, not by stopping events, but by giving them somewhere to dissolve. From a distance, silence also shapes what can be observed. Signals weaken as they cross empty space. Information arrives delayed and softened. This is why the universe appears calm when viewed from afar, even though intense processes may be occurring locally. Silence stretches perception. It spreads moments out so they do not overlap. This separation creates clarity. Events become readable because they are not crowded together. Time itself feels calmer in these regions, not because it slows, but because fewer events compete for attention. Silence also protects continuity. Without large empty regions, systems would interfere with one another constantly. Orbits would destabilize, fields would overlap unpredictably. Silence maintains separation. It preserves order by keeping interactions rare unless conditions align. This rarity is not emptiness, it is balance. The universe does not require constant activity to remain alive. It requires space to breathe. As we continue deeper into these quiet regions, it becomes clear that silence is not the opposite of existence. It is a condition that allows existence to persist. Silence does not erase motion or meaning. It gives them boundaries. It holds them apart gently, ensuring that what happens can happen fully without being overwhelmed by everything else at once.
As we move deeper into the universe's quiet regions, another idea begins to surface. Silence is not evenly spread. Some places are quieter than others. Between planets there is space, but between stars there is far more. And between galaxies, silence stretches to an almost unimaginable scale. In these interstellar and intergalactic regions, nothing happens for very long periods of time. Not because time has stopped, but because interactions have become extremely rare. Matter is so sparse that encounters are unlikely. Energy is so spread out that change becomes slow and gentle. In these places, silence feels vast rather than empty. There is a sense of openness that does not close in. Nothing presses inward. Nothing demands attention. Distance dominates everything. A single particle can drift for millions of years without meeting another. Light can travel uninterrupted across darkness, carrying information that will not be received for ages. Silence here is not fragile, it is resilient. It persists because there is nothing to disrupt it. This kind of quiet reshapes how scale is felt. Small movements lose their urgency. Large changes take immense time to become visible. From within these regions, the universe feels patient. Nothing is rushing toward completion. Processes unfold only when conditions slowly align. Silence gives permission for waiting. It does not force outcomes. It allows possibility to remain open without pressure. In these vast, quiet spaces, Gravity still exists, but it is subtle. Its influence stretches thin, guiding motion gently rather than pulling strongly. Objects move, but slowly. Trajectories change over enormous spans of time. Silence allows this softness. It prevents force from dominating. It gives balance room to emerge. When we imagine these regions, it is tempting to think of them as lifeless, but they are not separate from the rest of the universe. They connect everything. They are the medium through which light travels, through which gravity reaches, through which time unfolds evenly. Without these quiet expanses, nothing else could relate to anything beyond its immediate surroundings. Silence at this scale is not absence, it is connection without contact. It is the space that allows the universe to be large without becoming crowded. And as we continue, this quiet will begin to feel less distant, less abstract, and more like a fundamental part of how reality maintains its calm structure across immense distances.
When we think about silence, we often connect it to the absence of sound. In space, this idea becomes literal. Sound needs a medium, air, water, or something solid to carry vibration. In the quiet regions of the universe, there is no such medium. Without particles close enough to pass vibrations along, sound simply cannot exist. This makes silence the natural condition of space, not a temporary state. Nothing has to remove sound. It never forms in the first place. This absence of sound does not mean the absence of movement. Objects still travel, fields still extend, energy still shifts, but all of this happens without noise. Motion becomes invisible and inaudible. Silence wraps around activity without reacting to it. A planet can orbit a star in perfect quiet. A particle can accelerate without creating a trace of sound. Silence does not resist motion, it ignores it. This has an interesting effect on how we imagine events. Explosions in space, for example, are often imagined as loud. In reality, they are silent. Light spreads outward, matter expands, energy radiates, but there is no roar. Silence remains intact even during the most violent processes. This reinforces the idea that silence is not fragile. It does not break under intensity. It persists because it is defined by separation, not by weakness. Over time, this constant quiet shapes how energy behaves. Without friction from a dense medium, motion can continue for very long durations. Objects drift, radiation travels, nothing slows them down quickly. Silence allows persistence. It gives motion longevity. This is why light from distant stars can cross the universe almost unchanged. Silence offers no resistance. In these conditions, the universe feels less reactive. Events do not echo endlessly. They fade naturally as energy spreads thinner. Silence absorbs without absorbing. It does not capture energy. It simply provides space for it to disperse. This dispersion brings calm, not emotional calm, but physical balance. As we continue, silence will begin to feel less like an absence of sound and more like a defining feature of how the universe moves, communicates, and remains stable. Quiet is not something added afterward. It is the starting condition from which everything else quietly emerges. Silence in the universe also changes how time feels. even though time itself does not slow down. In regions where very little happens, there are fewer markers to notice time passing. No frequent collisions, no constant signals, no repeating sounds. Without these reference points, duration stretches subjectively. 1,000,000 years can pass with almost nothing to mark it. This makes silence feel deep rather than empty. Time continues forward at the same pace, but it leaves fewer traces behind. In these quiet regions, change does not stop, it simply becomes rare. Matter drifts slowly, fields remain steady. Small adjustments accumulate over immense spans. Silence allows time to unfold without interruption or urgency. Nothing needs to happen quickly, nothing competes for attention. This gives the universe its calm character on large scales. The absence of frequent events prevents time from feeling crowded. Moments do not pile up, they spread out. This spreading is not absence, it is spacing. Silence creates distance between events so they do not overlap or interfere. In doing so, it preserves order without enforcing it. The universe does not need constant activity to remain dynamic, it needs room. Silence provides that room by allowing time to pass quietly, evenly, without resistance. And as time passes in these silent regions, it does not erase possibility, it holds it open. Change can happen, but only when conditions align. Until then, silence remains, steady and patient, carrying time forward without demanding that anything announce itself.
Silence also shapes how distance is experienced in the universe. In quiet regions, distance is not just a measure of space, it becomes a condition. Objects are so far apart that their influence weakens long before they can interact. Gravity still reaches, but softly. Light still travels, but for long periods without interruption. Nothing rushes across these distances. Silence stretches them out, making separation feel natural rather than extreme. This separation reduces interference. Events do not stack on top of one another. Each one has room to exist on its own timeline. Because of this, the universe avoids congestion. Structures remain stable not because they are strong, but because they are isolated. Silence protects them by keeping interactions rare. Even large forces lose urgency when spread across vast distances. Influence becomes gradual instead of immediate. This gradualness gives the universe its slow, balanced rhythm. Silence does not block connection, it regulates it. It ensures that when things do connect, they do so gently, without overwhelming one another. In these conditions, nothing feels crowded, nothing presses inward. Space feels open and patient. Distance is not an obstacle to be crossed quickly. It is a feature that shapes how reality unfolds. Silence allows distance to exist without tension, giving the universe scale without chaos. And within that scale, time continues to move forward evenly, carrying everything across quiet spans where nothing needs to happen for the universe to remain complete. Silence in the universe also affects how energy behaves over long periods of time. In crowded environments, energy changes form quickly. Heat transfers, motion slows,
Interactions pile up. In quiet regions, none of this happens rapidly. Energy spreads so thinly that it can persist almost unchanged for immense spans of time. Radiation travels without losing much strength. Motion continues without friction. Nothing forces energy to settle quickly. Silence gives energy room to remain what it is. This persistence is one reason the universe feels stable on large scales. Processes are not constantly interrupting one another. Instead, they unfold independently, each within its own quiet space. This separation prevents overload. Without silence, energy would accumulate, collide, and dissipate too quickly. With silence, it stretches out, becoming gentler rather than intense. Over billions of years, this stretching smooths extremes. Violent events become isolated instead of contagious. Their effects fade naturally as they move through empty space. Silence does not stop energy, it dilutes it across distance and time. This dilution is what keeps the universe from becoming uniformly chaotic. Balance emerges not because energy disappears, but because it is allowed to spread. Silence acts as a moderator without acting at all. It does nothing, and that is exactly what allows everything else to persist. In these conditions, change becomes slow and readable. Nothing happens all at once. Everything has space to finish before something else begins. This pacing is essential. It allows the universe to remain coherent across vast scales. Silence is not a passive backdrop. It is an active condition that shapes how energy moves, how time is felt, and how stability is maintained simply by being there and not interfering.
Silence also influences how information travels through the universe. In dense regions, information changes quickly. Signals overlap, distort, and interfere with one another. In quiet regions, information moves cleanly. Light carries details across vast distances without being scattered. A single signal can travel for millions of years without interruption, preserving what it contains almost perfectly. Silence allows this clarity. It does not add noise. It does not alter the message. It simply provides space for information to remain intact. This is why we can observe distant galaxies and learn about their past. The silence between us and them has protected their light. Without that quiet, the universe would be unreadable. Messages would blur together. History would be lost in interference. Silence acts as a kind of archive. It does not store information actively, but it prevents it from being overwritten too quickly. This preservation gives the universe memory, not memory in a conscious sense, but in structure. What has happened leaves traces that can persist across time and distance. Silence makes those traces durable. It stretches them out so they are not immediately replaced. This durability allows patterns to be recognized long after they formed. It allows cause and effect to be connected across immense scales. Without silence, everything would feel immediate and chaotic. With silence, events remain distinct. They arrive separately. They can be understood. Silence does not communicate, but it makes communication possible. It does not speak, but it allows messages to travel without being drowned out. In this way, Silence becomes essential not just for calm, but for knowledge. It holds space open so the universe can reveal itself slowly, one quiet signal at a time, carried forward through vast regions where nothing interferes, and time continues evenly without crowding or confusion. When we think about silence, we often connect it to the absence of sound. In space, this idea becomes literal. Sound needs a medium, air, water, or something solid to carry vibration. In the quiet regions of the universe, there is no such medium. Without particles close enough to pass vibrations along, sound simply cannot exist. This makes silence the natural condition of space, not a temporary state. Nothing has to remove sound. It never forms in the first place. This absence of sound does not mean the absence of movement. Objects still travel, fields still extend, energy still shifts, but all of this happens without noise. Motion becomes invisible and inaudible. Silence wraps around activity without reacting to it. A planet can orbit a star in perfect quiet. A particle can accelerate without creating a trace of sound. Silence does not resist motion, it ignores it. This has an interesting effect on how we imagine events. Explosions in space, for example, are often imagined as loud. In reality, they are silent. Light spreads outward, matter expands, energy radiates, but there is no roar. Silence remains intact even during the most violent processes. This reinforces the idea that silence is not fragile. It does not break under intensity. It persists because it is defined by separation, not by weakness. Over time, this constant quiet shapes how energy behaves. Without friction from a dense medium, motion can continue for very long durations. Objects drift, radiation travels, nothing slows them down quickly. Silence allows persistence. It gives motion longevity. This is why light from distant stars can cross the universe almost unchanged. Silence offers no resistance. In these conditions, the universe feels less reactive. Events do not echo endlessly. They fade naturally as energy spreads thinner. Silence absorbs without absorbing. It does not capture energy. It simply provides space for it to disperse. This dispersion brings calm, not emotional calm, but physical balance. As we continue, silence will begin to feel less like an absence of sound and more like a defining feature of how the universe moves, communicates, and remains stable. Quiet is not something added afterward. It is the starting condition from which everything else quietly emerges. Silence in the universe also changes how time feels, even though time itself does not slow down. In regions where very little happens, there are fewer markers to notice time passing. No frequent collisions, no constant signals, no repeating sounds. Without these reference points, duration stretches subjectively. 1,000,000 years can pass with almost nothing to mark it. This makes silence feel deep rather than empty. Time continues forward at the same pace, but it leaves fewer traces behind. In these quiet regions, change does not stop, it simply becomes rare. Matter drifts slowly. Fields remain steady. Small adjustments accumulate over immense spans. Silence allows time to unfold without interruption or urgency.
Nothing needs to happen quickly. Nothing competes for attention. This gives the universe its calm character on large scales. The absence of frequent events prevents time from feeling crowded. Moments do not pile up, they spread out. This spreading is not absence, it is spacing. Silence creates distance between events so they do not overlap or interfere. In doing so, it preserves order without enforcing it. The universe does not need constant activity to remain dynamic. It needs room. Silence provides that room by allowing time to pass quietly, evenly, without resistance. And as time passes in these silent regions, it does not erase possibility, it holds it open. Change can happen, but only when conditions align. Until then, silence remains, steady and patient, carrying time forward without demanding that anything announce itself.
Silence also influences how motion settles rather than how it begins. In active regions, motion is constantly redirected. Collisions, resistance, and interaction reshape paths again and again. In quiet regions, motion is allowed to continue without interruption. An object can move for immense distances without changing direction. Nothing pushes back. Nothing demands correction. This creates a sense of smoothness in how the universe unfolds. Trajectories become long and gentle. Change happens, but it happens slowly, guided by subtle forces rather than sudden impacts. Silence allows motion to be patient. It does not accelerate it, and it does not stop it. It simply lets it persist. Over long spans of time, this persistence becomes structure. Paths repeat, orbits stabilize. Patterns emerge not because they are enforced, but because nothing disrupts them. Silence gives motion time to find balance. Without constant interference, systems discover configurations that can last. This is why large-scale structures in the universe feel orderly despite the absence of control. Order emerges because silence reduces conflict. It removes unnecessary interaction. Motion becomes readable because it is not constantly being rewritten. This readability allows prediction. It allows continuity. It allows the universe to feel calm even while everything is moving. Silence does not freeze motion. It refines it. It stretches change across time so that no single moment carries too much weight. Motion becomes part of a longer flow rather than a series of abrupt events. In this way, silence acts like a smoothing layer, turning movement into progression rather than disruption. And as time continues forward through these quiet regions, motion remains steady, unforced and uninterrupted, carried gently by silence that asks nothing of it except to continue. Silence in the universe also affects how energy behaves over long periods of time. In crowded environments, energy changes form quickly. Heat transfers, motion slows, interactions pile up. In quiet regions, none of this happens rapidly. Energy spreads so thinly that it can persist almost unchanged for immense spans of time. Radiation travels without losing much strength. Motion continues without friction. Nothing forces energy to settle quickly. Silence gives energy room to remain what it is. This persistence is one reason the universe feels stable on large scales. Processes are not constantly interrupting one another.
Instead, they unfold independently, each within its own quiet space. This separation prevents overload. Without silence, energy would accumulate, collide, and dissipate too quickly. With silence, it stretches out, becoming gentler rather than intense. Over billions of years, this stretching smooths extremes. Violent events become isolated instead of contagious. Their effects fade naturally as they move through empty space. Silence does not stop energy, it dilutes it across distance and time. This dilution is what keeps the universe from becoming uniformly chaotic. Balance emerges not because energy disappears, but because it is allowed to spread. Silence acts as a moderator without acting at all. It does nothing, and that is exactly what allows everything else to persist. In these conditions, change becomes slow and readable. Nothing happens all at once. Everything has space to finish before something else begins. This pacing is essential. It allows the universe to remain coherent across vast scales. Silence is not a passive backdrop. It is an active condition that shapes how energy moves, how time is felt, and how stability is maintained simply by being there and not interfering.
Silence also influences how information travels through the universe. In dense regions, information changes quickly. Signals overlap, distort, and interfere with one another. In quiet regions, information moves cleanly. Light carries details across vast distances without being scattered. A single signal can travel for millions of years without interruption, preserving what it contains almost perfectly. Silence allows this clarity. It does not add noise. It does not alter the message. It simply provides space for information to remain intact. This is why we can observe distant galaxies and learn about their past. The silence between us and them has protected their light. Without that quiet, the universe would be unreadable. Messages would blur together. History would be lost in interference. Silence acts as a kind of archive. It does not store information actively, but it prevents it from being overwritten too quickly. This preservation gives the universe memory, not memory in a conscious sense, but in structure. What has happened leaves traces that can persist across time and distance. Silence makes those traces durable. It stretches them out so they are not immediately replaced. This durability allows patterns to be recognized long after they formed. It allows cause and effect to be connected across immense scales. Without silence, everything would feel immediate and chaotic. With silence, events remain distinct. They arrive separately. They can be understood. Silence does not communicate, but it makes communication possible. It does not speak, but it allows messages to travel without being drowned out. In this way, silence becomes essential not just for calm, but for knowledge. It holds space open so the universe can reveal itself slowly, one quiet signal at a time, carried forward through vast regions where nothing interferes, and time continues evenly without crowding or confusion. Silence also reshapes how boundaries form in the universe. In active regions, boundaries are constantly tested. Forces press against each other, edges shift, and limits must be maintained through interaction.
In quiet regions, boundaries arise naturally from distance. Separation itself becomes the boundary. Nothing needs to push back. Nothing needs to defend its place. Silence creates borders by allowing space to exist between things. These borders are soft, not rigid. They do not stop connection entirely. They regulate it. Influence can still travel, but slowly and gently. This regulation prevents constant overlap. Systems remain distinct without effort. A star influences its surroundings without consuming them. A galaxy holds together without colliding endlessly with others. Silence makes this restraint possible. It ensures that boundaries do not need constant reinforcement. They persist because there is room for them to persist. This room gives structure durability. When boundaries are not under pressure, they can last. Over long periods, this allows the universe to organize itself into layers. Regions form with different densities, different behaviors, different rhythms. Silence separates these layers without isolating them completely. It allows diversity without conflict. Time then carries these layered structures forward. They do not need to be rebuilt each moment. They simply continue. This continuity is what makes the universe readable. Without clear boundaries, everything would blend together. Nothing would remain identifiable for long. Silence prevents this blending by spacing things out. It preserves identity through distance rather than force. And as time moves forward through these quiet expanses, boundaries remain gentle but reliable, holding structure in place without resistance, allowing complexity to persist calmly within a universe that is mostly silent.
Silence also changes how presence is felt in the universe. In places filled with activity, presence is defined by interaction. Things push, pull, collide, and respond. In quiet regions, presence exists without constant feedback. Objects are there even when nothing touches them. Space does not ask them to prove themselves through motion or sound. Silence allows existence to be unremarkable. Something can simply be without announcing itself. This has a calming effect on structure. Nothing needs to signal constantly to remain real. In these conditions, stability comes from endurance rather than attention. Objects persist because nothing interferes with them, not because they are reinforced by activity. This persistence shapes how the universe holds itself together. It allows long-term arrangements to form without maintenance. Orbits remain steady. Paths remain clear. Fields remain extended. Silence supports this by minimizing disruption. When interactions are rare, systems have time to settle into balanced states. They do not need to correct themselves constantly. Time provides duration, and silence provides space. Together, they allow presence to feel continuous rather than fragile. From within this calm, existence does not feel urgent. Nothing is at risk of disappearing simply because it is not active. Silence removes that pressure. It allows being without performance. Even on a cosmic scale, this matters. The universe is not held together by constant action. It is held together by vast regions where almost nothing happens. These regions give everything else somewhere to exist without conflict. Presence becomes less about doing and more about remaining. Silence makes that possible by staying out of the way.
And as time moves forward through these quiet expanses, presence continues effortlessly, supported by the simple fact that nothing is forcing it to change. Silence also shapes how rarity becomes meaningful in the universe. In crowded environments, events happen often. Patterns repeat quickly. Nothing feels exceptional for long. In quiet regions, events are rare. Because they are rare, they stand out when they occur. Silence gives rarity its weight. When something finally happens after a long period of stillness, it does not need to be dramatic to matter. Its significance comes from contrast. Time has stretched the interval so widely that even small changes feel noticeable. Silence creates this contrast naturally. It does not highlight events, it simply allows long gaps between them. These gaps give events space to be recognized without competition. Nothing else is happening at the same time to dilute their presence. This is why distant phenomena can feel profound. A single burst of light crossing an empty region carries more clarity than countless overlapping signals in a dense one. Silence sharpens meaning by reducing frequency. It allows each occurrence to arrive alone. Over long spans, this scarcity prevents saturation. Nothing becomes background noise. Everything that happens leaves a clear trace. Silence ensures that traces do not pile up too quickly. They remain readable. They remain distinct. This spacing also protects the universe from exhaustion. If everything happened constantly, structure would blur. Time would feel compressed. Silence avoids this by giving reality time to recover between events. It allows processes to finish before new ones begin. This pacing keeps the universe legible and calm. Rarity is not accidental. It is a result of vast quiet. And as time continues forward through these silent regions, rarity remains possible, giving the universe moments of clarity that stand out not because they are loud, but because silence has made room for them.
Silence also influences how expectation forms in the universe. Where events are frequent, expectation becomes sharp. Systems anticipate constant interaction. In quiet regions, expectation relaxes. Nothing is assumed to happen soon. Possibility remains open without pressure. Silence stretches anticipation across long spans of time, making it gentle rather than urgent. This gentleness affects how processes unfold. Without the need to respond constantly, systems conserve energy. They remain stable, waiting for conditions to align naturally. Silence gives patience a physical form. It allows readiness to exist without tension. When something finally occurs, it does so into a space that has not been crowded by constant preparation. This makes transitions smoother. There is no backlog of unfinished responses. Everything is free to adjust slowly. Over long periods, this reduces instability. The universe does not remain calm because nothing happens, but because nothing is forced to happen quickly. Silence removes deadlines. It does not rush outcomes into existence. This absence of urgency prevents collapse. Systems are not pushed beyond their limits. They are allowed to mature. Expectation becomes diffuse instead of focused. Nothing is waiting intensely. Everything is simply available. This availability keeps the universe flexible. When conditions change, adjustment is possible because nothing has been locked into immediate reaction. Silence preserves optionality. It keeps paths open rather than committing them too early. As time continues forward through these quiet regions, expectation remains light. The future is not crowded with demands, it is spacious. And within that spaciousness, change can occur naturally, without strain, carried gently by time, through a universe that mostly waits in silence. Silence also affects how continuity is maintained across immense spans of time. In environments filled with constant interaction, continuity must be actively reinforced. Systems correct themselves repeatedly. Deviations are adjusted quickly. In quiet regions, continuity emerges almost effortlessly. With little interference, processes can follow long trajectories without needing constant correction. Silence allows history to stretch forward smoothly. Nothing interrupts the path often enough to fragment it. This creates a sense of uninterrupted unfolding. Events connect across time, not because they are actively linked, but because nothing has broken the connection. Silence protects this linkage by staying out of the way. It allows cause and effect to remain aligned over long durations. Even small influences can accumulate meaningfully when they are not constantly overridden. This accumulation gives direction to change without forcing it. Time moves forward evenly, and silence ensures that forward movement does not become noisy or chaotic. Instead of many competing narratives, there is space for long, coherent ones. Structures persist because they are not constantly challenged. Patterns remain readable because they are not constantly rewritten. Silence acts as a stabilizer, not by acting, but by permitting continuity to hold. Over billions of years, this permission becomes decisive. It allows the universe to remember itself in structure, not in memory. Paths remain paths. Relationships remain relationships. The present remains connected to the past without strain. Silence gives time the conditions it needs to remain smooth. And as time continues forward through these calm regions, continuity is not something that must be maintained. It simply happens, carried quietly by silence that allows everything to remain connected without effort or interruption. Silence also reshapes how the universe experiences waiting. In quiet regions, waiting is not a pause between actions. It is the dominant state. Nothing is delayed because nothing is expected to happen immediately. Processes exist in a kind of readiness without pressure. Matter remains where it is. Energy stays distributed. Conditions hold steady for long periods without needing adjustment. Silence allows this sustained waiting to feel natural rather than empty. Time continues forward, but it leaves very few marks. Because of this, waiting does not feel like wasted time. It feels like stability. In these regions, the universe is not preparing for a specific outcome. It is simply available. When conditions eventually shift, they do so into a space that has not been strained by constant anticipation. This makes change smoother. There is no urgency to resolve anything. Silence removes the need for constant response. Systems do not exhaust themselves reacting to every small fluctuation. They remain calm, conserving structure and energy. This calm allows long-term processes to unfold without interruption. Waiting becomes productive without being active. It holds potential without demanding realization. Over immense spans, this is what allows rare events to occur without destabilizing everything else. Silence gives the universe time to wait properly. And as time continues forward through these quiet regions, waiting is no longer a lack of action. It becomes a condition that supports patience, balance, and continuity, allowing the universe to remain open to change without being driven by it. Silence also changes how absence is understood in the universe. In everyday experience, absence often feels like something missing. In cosmic terms, absence is simply space allowed to remain unfilled. Silence gives absence structure. It is not a gap waiting to be closed, but a condition that holds form on its own. Empty regions are not unfinished, they are complete as they are. Nothing is required to justify their existence. This completeness removes pressure from the universe. Not every region needs to produce matter, light, or activity to belong. Silence allows absence to be stable. It prevents the constant urge to fill every space. This stability is essential. Without it, matter would cluster endlessly. Everything would collapse inward. Silence resists this not by pushing outward, but by allowing space to remain open. It gives separation legitimacy. In doing so, it creates balance between what exists and what does not. Absence becomes part of structure rather than a flaw in it. Time moves forward through these absences without difficulty. Nothing breaks continuity. Nothing interrupts flow. Silence carries absence just as smoothly as it carries presence. This smoothness is why the universe does not feel fragmented. Gaps do not disrupt coherence, they support it. Silence ensures that what is not there does not become a problem. It allows emptiness to function as a stabilizing element. And as time continues forward through these regions of absence, nothing needs to appear for the universe to remain whole. Silence holds space open calmly, proving that not everything must be filled for reality to remain complete.
Silence also influences how balance is maintained without constant adjustment. In regions filled with activity, balance must be corrected again and again. Forces compete, interactions pile up, and systems react continuously. In quiet regions, balance emerges from non-interference. When very little happens, very little needs to be fixed. Silence allows conditions to remain close to equilibrium for long periods. Small deviations do not cascade quickly. They spread out slowly and often dissolve on their own. This self-regulating calm is not the result of control, but of space. Distance reduces feedback. Separation prevents amplification. Silence gives systems time to settle instead of forcing immediate response. Over immense spans, this creates resilience. Structures persist not because they are constantly maintained, but because nothing disturbs them often enough to require maintenance. Time moves forward evenly, and silence ensures that this movement does not create instability by overcrowding events. Change still occurs, but it arrives gently, one influence at a time.
This pacing keeps the universe from oscillating wildly between extremes. Balance becomes a natural outcome of patience. Silence does not correct imbalance directly. It gives imbalance room to relax. Energy spreads, motion smooths, extremes soften. This softening does not erase difference, it integrates it into a broader context. The universe remains dynamic without becoming reactive. Silence makes this possible by keeping interactions rare and spaced out. And as time continues forward through these calm regions, balance does not feel like something achieved, it feels like something allowed, quietly sustained by silence that lets the universe remain stable without constant effort or intervention. Silence also shapes how beginnings and endings overlap in the universe. In busy environments, transitions are sharp. One state replaces another quickly, leaving little room between them. In quiet regions, transitions blur. Beginnings do not start suddenly, and endings do not stop abruptly. Silence stretches these changes across long spans of time, allowing states to coexist briefly without conflict. Something can be forming while something else is fading, and neither needs to dominate the moment. This overlap preserves continuity. Nothing is forced to disappear the instant it finishes. Nothing is required to fully arrive before it can exist. Silence gives transitions patience. It allows processes to ease into new conditions gradually. Over cosmic timescales, this is essential. Without it, change would feel violent. Structures would snap rather than shift. Silence prevents that by spacing events out so that transformation feels like movement rather than rupture. Time moves forward evenly, and silence ensures that this forward motion does not compress transitions into single points. Instead, it gives them width. This width makes the universe forgiving. Systems can adjust without being perfectly aligned. Small mismatches are absorbed rather than amplified. Change becomes something that happens with the universe, not against it. Silence does not guide transitions, but it gives them room to complete. As time continues forward through these quiet regions, beginnings and endings lose their sharpness. They become phases rather than moments. And within those phases, continuity remains intact, supported by silence that allows everything to change without forcing anything to vanish all at once. Silence also influences how the universe holds potential. In regions filled with constant activity, potential is quickly converted into action. Energy is used, interactions occur, outcomes follow. In quiet regions, potential remains stored rather than spent. Conditions exist without being immediately resolved. Nothing forces possibility to collapse into event. Silence allows readiness without demand. This stored potential is not inactive, it is simply unexpressed. Fields remain extended, matter remains positioned, energy remains available. Time moves forward while these conditions hold, unchanged yet capable. This is what gives the universe flexibility. When change finally happens, it does not begin from nothing. It begins from a state that has been quietly prepared. Silence makes this preparation possible by preventing premature release. It keeps systems from exhausting themselves. Potential does not leak away through constant reaction.
It remains distributed, waiting for alignment. This waiting is not tension, it is balance. The universe does not feel compelled to act simply because it can. Silence removes that compulsion. It allows possibility to exist without urgency. Over long spans, this preserves richness. Many futures remain viable because none are forced too early. Silence keeps options open. It ensures that change, when it comes, is shaped by accumulated conditions rather than sudden pressure. Time supports this by continuing evenly without accelerating outcomes. Together, time and silence allow the universe to remain adaptable. Nothing is locked into a single path too soon. Potential can shift, redirect, or remain dormant as needed. And as time continues forward through these quiet regions, possibility stays present without strain, held gently by silence that allows the universe to be ready without having to act.
Silence also changes how the universe responds to disturbance. In dense regions, a disturbance spreads quickly. Effects multiply. Reactions trigger further reactions. In quiet regions, disturbance travels slowly and weakly. There is little nearby to be affected. Silence absorbs impact by giving it nowhere to spread rapidly. A change may occur, but its influence thins as it moves outward. Distance weakens urgency. What might become chaos in a crowded environment becomes a localized adjustment in a silent one. This containment is not imposed. It happens naturally because separation limits amplification. Silence prevents small events from becoming overwhelming. It keeps disruptions from dominating the system. Over long periods, this allows the universe to remain calm even when change occurs. Nothing needs to be corrected immediately. Time provides duration, and silence provides space. Together, they allow disturbances to settle rather than escalate. Energy disperses gently. Motion smooths out. The system regains balance without force. This is why the universe can host extreme events without becoming unstable overall. Violence remains local. Calm remains global. Silence acts as a buffer, not by blocking change, but by spacing it out so it can be absorbed. As time continues forward through these quiet regions, disturbance becomes just another phase rather than a threat. Change is allowed to happen without overwhelming what surrounds it. Silence ensures that the universe can experience disruption without losing coherence, carrying adjustment forward patiently until stability returns on its own. There are regions in the universe where nothing new arrives for an extremely long time. No signals, no matter, no sudden changes. In these places, the universe is not reacting, adjusting, or responding. It is simply continuing. This kind of stillness reveals something important about silence. Silence is not always about space. Sometimes it is about duration. When nothing interrupts a region for millions or billions of years, silence becomes a measure of stability rather than emptiness. Time passes without leaving marks. Structures remain unchanged, not because they are reinforced, but because nothing challenges them. This lack of challenge allows conditions to persist effortlessly. The universe does not need to maintain these regions, it only needs to not disturb them. Silence provides that non-interference.
In doing so, it allows time to accumulate quietly. The longer nothing happens, the more resistant the region becomes to sudden change, not through strength, but through inertia. Silence creates inertia by reducing interaction. When there is little to respond to, there is little to react with. This makes the universe feel steady on large scales. Change is possible, but it must arrive from far away or over long periods. Nothing emerges abruptly from these quiet zones. They do not generate events, they receive them slowly. This reception without reaction is what keeps the universe from constantly reinventing itself. Silence preserves continuity by letting time pass without demanding novelty. As time continues forward through these undisturbed regions, the absence of interruption becomes a stabilizing force, showing that sometimes the most powerful influence on the universe is not what happens, but what does not.
Far from stars and galaxies, there are stretches of space where even change seems hesitant. Not stopped, just delayed. In these regions, silence is not created by distance alone, but by the lack of encounters. Nothing meets anything else often enough to leave a mark. Because of this, cause and effect loosen their grip. Actions do not immediately lead to consequences. Influences take so long to arrive that they lose urgency along the way. This makes silence feel expansive rather than empty. Time continues forward, but it does so without punctuation. No clear moments stand out. Everything blends into a long, even continuation. This has an important effect on how the universe remains coherent. Without constant feedback, systems do not oscillate wildly. They do not overcorrect. They remain close to whatever state they already occupy. Silence stabilizes by slowing response. It prevents the universe from reacting too quickly to small changes. In these regions, nothing demands immediate adjustment. Everything is allowed to drift. This drifting is not aimless. It follows subtle gradients shaped over immense spans of time. Gravity still guides motion, but gently. Fields still exist, but without sharp boundaries. Silence smooths these influences so they act patiently rather than forcefully. Over long periods, this patience becomes structure. The universe does not need constant intervention to remain ordered. It needs places where nothing insists on change. Silence provides those places. As time continues forward through these calm stretches, reality remains legible not because it is controlled, but because it is allowed to move slowly enough for coherence to survive. In some of the quietest regions of the universe, silence begins to feel less like a condition and more like a presence. Not something that happens, but something that remains. These regions do not draw attention because nothing there competes for it. There is no buildup, no release, no sequence that demands to be followed. Time passes evenly, without landmarks. This evenness has an important effect. It prevents history from becoming crowded. When few events occur, none of them overlap. Each one has room to exist fully before anything else arrives. Silence creates this spacing. It ensures that moments do not pile up on top of one another. Because of this, the universe avoids saturation. Nothing becomes noise simply by happening too often. Silence preserves clarity by limiting frequency. It does not remove events, it gives them isolation. This isolation allows influence to be traced cleanly.
A change that occurs remains identifiable because nothing else immediately replaces it. Over immense spans, this creates a calm kind of memory, not stored, not recalled, but embedded in structure. Paths remain clear, conditions remain legible. Silence allows time to leave marks without smudging them. This is why distant regions can remain understandable long after they formed. Nothing rushed in to overwrite their history. Silence guarded it by staying empty. In this way, silence becomes a form of protection, not against change, but against confusion. It keeps the universe from becoming cluttered with its own activity. And as time continues forward through these sparse regions, clarity survives, not because the universe explains itself, but because silence has given it enough space to remain readable.
In the deepest quiet of the universe, silence begins to reveal its final role. It allows everything else to be temporary without becoming meaningless. In regions where almost nothing happens, nothing is pressured to last forever or to disappear quickly. Change is permitted, but it is never rushed. This removes a need for permanence. Stars can form and fade. Light can pass and move on. Structures can exist briefly or for ages, and none of them disrupt the calm that surrounds them. Silence accepts impermanence without conflict. It does not try to preserve what passes, and it does not force what remains. It simply provides the conditions for time to move forward without demand. This is why the universe can change continuously without feeling unstable. Silence absorbs transition by giving it room. Nothing has to conclude sharply. Nothing has to begin loudly. Everything is allowed to arrive, exist, and move on naturally. In this way, silence becomes the quiet agreement that makes continuation possible. It ensures that the universe does not cling to what has been and does not rush toward what will be. Time flows through this agreement evenly, carrying moments without weighing them down. Silence does not erase meaning, it prevents meaning from becoming heavy. It keeps experience light enough to continue. And as time moves forward through these vast, quiet regions, nothing needs to be resolved for reality to remain whole. Silence holds the universe open, steady, and unforced, allowing everything to happen once, then pass on, without resistance, without accumulation, simply as part of an ongoing, quiet unfolding. Beyond the familiar quiet between stars, there are regions where silence stretches so far that comparison stops being useful. No nearby reference points, no repeating patterns, no rhythm to follow. In these places, the universe is not presenting information. It is not signaling or responding. It is simply extended. This extension changes how existence is framed. Without nearby events, nothing feels central. There is no foreground and no background, only space continuing evenly in all directions. Silence creates this equality. Nothing stands out enough to dominate attention. Everything that exists there exists without emphasis. This has a calming structural effect. When nothing is highlighted, nothing competes. The universe does not need to prioritize. It does not need to decide what matters most. Silence removes hierarchy by removing proximity.
Distance evens everything out. Influence becomes weak, gradual, and distributed. In this state, the universe feels less like a collection of events and more like a condition that persists. Time moves forward, but it does so without marking progress. There are no milestones to pass, no accumulation of urgency. This lack of progression does not mean stagnation. It means neutrality. Change is possible, but it is not encouraged or discouraged. Silence allows existence to remain undecided. Over immense spans, this undecided state becomes a form of balance. Nothing is pushed to evolve faster than it can sustain. Nothing is forced to resolve. Silence holds the universe in a state where continuation does not depend on activity. As time continues forward through these vast, unmarked regions, reality remains open and stable, not because something is happening, but because nothing is insisting that it must.
There is a point in the universe where silence no longer feels like something surrounding events, but like the condition in which events might someday occur. In these regions, nothing is preparing to happen. There is no build-up, no tension, no sense of arrival. Space simply remains as it is, open and undisturbed. This kind of silence removes direction from experience. Without frequent change, there is no strong sense of before or after. Time still moves forward, but it leaves almost no footprint. Moments do not stack into stories. They pass without forming sequences. This has a stabilizing effect on reality. When nothing is pressing toward outcome, nothing collapses under expectation. Silence prevents anticipation from hardening into pressure. It keeps possibility loose. In these conditions, the universe is not oriented toward progress or decline. It is oriented toward persistence. Things remain because nothing forces them to become something else. Even potential feels different here. It does not pull toward expression. It simply exists, evenly distributed. Silence allows this neutrality. It does not favor emergence or disappearance. It allows both to remain optional. Over long spans, this optionality becomes protective. It ensures that change, when it happens, is not the result of strain. It arrives only when conditions truly align. Time supports this by continuing without emphasis. It does not speed up to provoke events. It does not slow down to preserve them. It moves evenly, carrying silence forward as a stable background. And within that background, the universe remains calm, not because it is empty, but because nothing is being asked of it. Silence holds reality in a state where continuation is effortless, and time can pass without needing to explain itself. In the quietest parts of the universe, silence begins to blur the idea of location itself. When nothing nearby changes, position loses urgency. Being here or there matters less when there is little difference between places. Space becomes uniform, and silence reinforces that uniformity. Nothing marks one point as special. Nothing draws attention. This evenness creates a kind of calm neutrality. The universe does not signal preference. It does not organize itself around focal points. Silence allows this by removing contrast. Without contrast, movement has no destination to rush toward. Objects still exist, but their presence does not compete with anything else. Time continues forward through this uniformity, but it does so quietly,
without milestones. There is no sense of arrival because there is nowhere distinct to arrive at. This does not make the universe empty, it makes it balanced. When locations are similar, nothing needs to be claimed or defended. Influence spreads gently instead of concentrating. This prevents tension from forming. Silence removes the conditions that create urgency around place. It allows existence to be evenly distributed. Over immense spans, this distribution stabilizes the universe. Nothing accumulates too much significance simply by being where it is. Everything is allowed to remain without pressure. Even change becomes subtle. Motion occurs, but without emphasis. Direction exists, but without goal. Silence supports this state by ensuring that difference does not grow unless something actively creates it. Time carries this uniformity forward patiently. It does not break it apart. It does not insist on variation. And as time moves through these quiet regions, space remains open and neutral, allowing reality to persist without needing landmarks, centers, or destinations, held together by silence that keeps everything equally present. Silence also reshapes how direction is felt in the universe. In active regions, direction is clear because forces compete and outcomes point somewhere. In quiet regions, direction becomes subtle. Motion exists, but it is not pulled strongly toward any obvious end. Objects drift without urgency. Paths are long and gentle. Silence removes the pressure that turns movement into pursuit. Nothing needs to arrive quickly. This changes how time feels as well. Without strong direction, time does not feel like a march towards something. It feels like continuation without demand. The universe is not advancing toward a goal in these regions. It is simply remaining coherent as it moves forward. This coherence comes from the absence of strong gradients. When differences are small, nothing accelerates dramatically. Silence flattens extremes, keeping motion smooth and predictable. Over long spans, this smoothness becomes stability. The universe does not need guidance to remain ordered. It needs places where direction is optional. Silence provides that option. It allows movement to exist without intention. This does not stop change, it makes change gentle. Time continues to carry everything forward, but it does so without sharpening direction into urgency. Nothing is compelled to resolve. Nothing is forced to progress. Silence keeps the universe from turning motion into pressure. It lets existence unfold without insisting that it goes somewhere specific. And as time continues forward through these quiet regions, direction remains present but relaxed, allowing reality to persist calmly without needing to decide what it is moving toward.
Silence also affects how accumulation behaves in the universe. In regions filled with constant activity, accumulation happens quickly. Matter gathers, energy concentrates, effects stack on top of one another. In quiet regions, accumulation slows almost to a pause. Nothing arrives often enough to build rapidly. Changes spread out instead of piling up. Silence prevents excess from forming. It keeps the universe from becoming dense everywhere at once. This has a calming structural effect. When accumulation is slow, systems have time to adjust. They do not become overloaded. They do not collapse under their own weight. Silence regulates growth simply by limiting frequency. It does not stop things from gathering. It spaces that gathering out across long spans of time. This spacing allows balance to form naturally.
What builds does so gently, with room to settle before the next addition arrives. Over immense durations, this creates stability without rigidity. Structures can exist without becoming brittle. They are not forced to expand or decay too quickly. Silence gives accumulation patience. It allows the universe to grow unevenly without losing coherence. Some regions become rich in matter and activity. Others remain sparse and calm. This unevenness is not a flaw. It is what keeps everything from competing at once. Silence ensures that growth in one place does not overwhelm the whole. It localizes intensity. It contains density. And as time continues forward through these quiet regions, accumulation remains controlled not by limits but by absence. Nothing needs to be removed. Nothing needs to be enforced. Silence simply keeps arrivals rare enough that what does arrive has time to belong before anything else follows, allowing the universe to remain expansive, balanced, and quietly ordered. Far away from anything familiar, the universe settles into a state that feels almost untouched. Not empty in a dramatic way, but unchanged in a patient one. In these regions, silence is not responding to events because there are so few events to respond to. Nothing presses forward, nothing falls behind. Space simply remains open, holding whatever exists without drawing attention to it. This kind of silence reveals a deeper role. It allows the universe to slow its internal conversation. Without frequent interaction, nothing needs to announce itself. Existence becomes quiet by default, not because something is missing, but because nothing is demanding recognition. In such conditions, time moves forward without creating tension. There are no clusters of moments, no crowded sequences. One moment does not lean heavily into the next. Instead, time spreads evenly, giving each instant enough room to pass without urgency. This spacing prevents compression. Nothing is forced to compete with what comes before or after. Silence keeps time from becoming dense. It stretches duration so widely that experience, if there were any to notice it, would feel weightless. This has a powerful stabilizing effect on the universe. When nothing is constantly interacting, systems do not need to correct themselves. They remain close to equilibrium simply because there is nothing pushing them away from it. Silence removes friction not by eliminating motion, but by eliminating interference. Motion continues, but it does so gently, without resistance, without sudden redirection. Over long periods, this gentleness becomes structure. Paths remain paths. Positions remain positions. Nothing needs to be reinforced to persist. Silence also protects the universe from exhaustion. If everything were happening everywhere all the time, change would collapse into noise, patterns would blur, meaning would dissolve. Silence prevents this by limiting how often anything can happen in one place. It gives reality recovery time between events. Even extreme processes remain isolated, surrounded by vast quiet that absorbs their influence slowly. This containment ensures that intensity never becomes universal. Calm always outweighs disturbance. In these regions, the universe is not preparing for anything. There is no buildup, no anticipation, no sense of arrival. Possibility remains open without pulling toward expression. This openness is important. It allows the future to remain flexible. Nothing is forced into existence prematurely. Silence keeps options unspent. Time carries them forward gently, without deciding which one should unfold. As time continues through these calm expanses, it becomes clear that silence is not the absence of structure, but the condition that allows structure to last. It gives the universe room to exist without strain. Nothing needs to hurry. Nothing needs to resolve. Reality continues simply because nothing is interfering with its continuation. Silence holds the universe steady, not by acting, but by allowing everything else to move forward slowly, evenly, and without pressure.
Instead of thinking about silence as something surrounding the universe, it helps to imagine silence as something the universe rests inside. In these vast regions, nothing is pressing reality forward or pulling it backward. Space is not waiting to be filled, and time is not waiting to be marked. Everything simply continues. This kind of quiet changes how existence carries itself. Without constant interaction, nothing needs to prove that it is there. Presence becomes effortless. Things exist because they are allowed to remain, not because they are reinforced by activity. In this stillness, time does something subtle. It stops feeling like a sequence of steps and starts feeling like a wide open field. Moments do not stack tightly together. They spread out, leaving space between them. This spacing prevents pressure from forming. No moment rushes to replace another. Nothing is crowded out of existence. Silence gives time enough room to flow without friction. Because of this, the universe does not feel strained by its own duration. Billions of years can pass without creating tension or urgency. This openness also changes how cause and effect behave. In active regions, causes quickly demand effects. Reactions follow almost immediately. In quiet regions, cause and effect loosen their grip on one another. Influences still exist, but they travel slowly and arrive gently. Outcomes are delayed, softened, and sometimes barely noticeable. Silence stretches causality across distance and time, turning sharp chains of events into long, smooth transitions. This makes the universe forgiving. Small imbalances do not instantly grow into crises. They fade, disperse, or settle before becoming disruptive. Because of this, silence becomes a form of protection. Not protection from change, but protection from excess. It prevents the universe from overreacting to itself. When something happens, silence ensures that it happens locally. The rest of reality remains undisturbed. This separation allows many different states to coexist without conflict. Calm regions remain calm even while intense processes unfold elsewhere. Silence ensures that no single event defines the whole. In these regions, there is also no sense of urgency toward meaning. Nothing needs to matter immediately. Significance emerges slowly, if at all. Silence allows meaning to remain optional. Events can occur without demanding interpretation. They can pass without being resolved. This removes weight from existence. Reality becomes lighter, easier to carry forward through time. As time continues its steady movement through these silent expanses, nothing is lost and nothing is forced. Continuation itself becomes enough. Silence does not direct the universe. It does not organize it or explain it. It simply gives it room. And in that room, the universe remains stable, open, and quietly coherent, moving forward without pressure, without accumulation, and without needing to announce that it is doing so.
Long before anything noticeable happens, silence has already decided the pace. In these regions of the universe, nothing accelerates just because it can. There is no momentum building toward action, no pressure forming beneath the surface. Everything moves only when conditions genuinely allow it. This creates a kind of calm honesty in how reality unfolds. Nothing is exaggerated. Nothing is delayed artificially. Silence removes performance from existence. Processes do not act to be seen. They unfold because they are able to. Time flows through this honesty without resistance. Without frequent events to interrupt it, time does not fragment into highlights. It remains continuous, smooth, and unbroken. This continuity prevents strain. Nothing has to catch up. Nothing falls behind. The universe does not feel like it is progressing towards something it must reach. It feels like it is remaining consistent with itself. Silence ensures this consistency by limiting how often anything can disturb it. Even when change arrives, it does so into a space that has not been overstimulated. Effects spread slowly. Reactions soften before they can escalate. Silence gives reality a long memory without burden. Past conditions influence the present gently, without dominating it. Nothing accumulates so heavily that it becomes impossible to move forward. This makes the universe resilient. It can absorb variation without collapsing into noise. Silence acts as a buffer against excess, not by stopping events, but by spacing them far enough apart that they never overwhelm the whole. In these conditions, the universe does not need constant correction. It self-regulates through patience. Time supports this by continuing evenly, without reward or punishment. Nothing is sped up for importance. Nothing is slowed down for preservation. Silence and time move together, creating an environment where existence does not have to justify itself. It simply continues. And as this continuation unfolds across vast, quiet regions, stability emerges not as a goal, but as a natural outcome of nothing being forced to happen faster than it should.
There comes a point where silence no longer feels like something added to the universe, but like the condition that makes the universe possible at all. In these far-reaching, quiet regions, nothing is being maintained, corrected, or guided. Reality is not held together by effort. It holds itself together because there is enough space for everything to remain where it is. Silence provides that space. It prevents reality from collapsing inward under its own complexity. When interactions are rare, structures are not constantly stressed. They do not need reinforcement. They endure simply because nothing challenges them often enough to cause failure. Time moves forward through this endurance calmly. It does not test stability, it reveals it. Over immense spans, what remains is what was never forced to change. Silence allows this natural filtering, not by selection, but by non-interference. Things persist because they are left alone long enough to do so. This creates a universe that feels quietly confident. Nothing is rushing to prove its existence. Nothing is threatened by stillness. Silence removes the idea that motion equals vitality. Life, structure, and continuity do not depend on constant activity. They depend on conditions that allow persistence. In these regions, even decay happens gently. Nothing breaks suddenly, nothing vanishes abruptly. Change arrives as redistribution rather than loss. Silence softens endings so they dissolve instead of shatter. This softness protects coherence. It allows reality to evolve without tearing itself apart. As time continues through these calm expanses, the universe feels less like a system in motion and more like a condition that remains. Movement exists within it, but it is not required everywhere. Silence makes room for stillness without turning it into absence, and within that room, reality continues forward without strain, held together not by action, but by the quiet permission to simply remain. Eventually, the idea of silence stops feeling like a subject and starts feeling like a conclusion that does not need to close. In the widest, quietest regions of the universe, nothing signals an ending. There is no final state waiting to be reached, no moment where everything settles permanently. Silence reveals that continuation itself is the natural condition. Things do not move forward to arrive somewhere else. They move forward because forward is the only way time exists. In this understanding, emptiness is not a lack, and quiet is not a pause. They are the space in which everything else can happen without being crowded, rushed, or forced. Time carries moments gently, allowing them to appear, exist briefly, and fade into influence without needing to resolve into meaning. Nothing is required to stay. Nothing is required to leave. Silence removes obligation from existence. It shows that the universe does not depend on constant creation or constant destruction to remain whole. It depends on balance, distance, and patience. In these final, quiet stretches, even change feels optional. Possibility remains open without pulling reality in any direction. The future is not a destination. It is simply the next moment arriving, just as calm as the one before it. Silence allows this arrival to happen without weight. There is no accumulation demanding release, no story demanding an ending. Everything that exists is allowed to rest within time's steady movement. And as time continues, nothing is lost, nothing is finished, and nothing needs to be completed. The universe remains open, spacious, and quietly coherent, held together by vast regions where almost nothing happens, and where that almost nothing is enough. As we come to the end of this session, there's nothing you need to take with you. No ideas to hold on to, no thoughts to finish. The words can fade, just like the day slowly does. If you found this space calming, you can leave a like or subscribe to the channel. It quietly supports more moments like this. For now, let everything settle. You don't need to listen closely anymore. The sound can stay, even as attention drifts away. Rest easy, and let time continue gently on its own.